Good afternoon. If I can call the meeting to order, please. Are there any public speakers? No public speakers. Okay. Then approval of minutes. Can I ask for a motion, please? Second? In favor? Thank you. Committee work plan, Linda?
There is one change to the committee work plan. This month we were meant to do the quarterly update on minority and women-owned businesses. We're deferring that till next month to be able to clearly separate out for you our success against capital goals as distinguished from overall agency goals. So we'll come back with that next month. Otherwise, there's no change.
Do you want to go straight to the commitments completions update?
Yes, as I mentioned last month, that pending the approval of a new program, I'll just report orally on where we are on commitments completions. So for commitments for February, we committed $164 million. This was largely reflects, notably, the Corbin building restoration. In terms of completions, we've completed $326 million. Notable in there is a transit project on antenna cable replacement and two smaller rehabilitations of a roof and a parking lot at Long Island Railroad. And that's the notable elements of completions commitments.
Any questions on that? Okay. So I think really the two main business items for this meeting are the update on the New York City transit program in regard to infrastructure and facilities, and then second to speak about the capital construction company and some of the work that's going on there. So why don't we just get into the two main pieces of that. Micah, you can take it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Okay, let me start with New York City transit infrastructure program. 28 projects covering $1.5 billion worth of work. You'll notice there's no slide there that describes this because everything is proceeding in a satisfactory manner. All of our recommendations from 2009 are completed and closed out. I have no issues to report to you in this cycle. Any questions?
It would be very easy to jump right past that. But when I was briefed earlier last week in preparation for this meeting, I noted that certainly in the 6 months that I've been here, that this is the first time that a report had come through which had said anything like that. And my guess is, for those of you who've sat around this table for a much longer period of time than I have, that it's worth noting as well. And I think in that context, just to say publicly what I had said to Fred privately, I mean, I think it really is quite an accomplishment when you think about all of this work which is really taking place. So much of it is taking place on the right-of-way. So much of it is happening with the need for complex GOs that are taking place. From a rider perspective, those GOs are as painful as can be, and I'm out there every weekend, and I know that that's the case, and Andrew will explain to me why it's even worse than I think, and I know it's true. The only thing that would make that worse is if we actually were not getting the work done that we were trying to get done. And I think I think we should at least recognize that, and I want to thank Fred and the New York City Transit team for the progress that's happening. Knock on wood that it will continue, but it is the critically unseen part of what we call the hidden infrastructure that is happening there, and I think it's so easy to lose focus on that, and it's so critically important to the system. So thank you very much.
Okay, the second component of our monthly report covers the 5 projects under MTA Capital Construction. And I want to begin by saying on the Fulton Street Transit Center projects, that project too is proceeding in a satisfactory manner, and there are no issues to report there. With respect to the number 7 subway extension project, the project cost is trending higher than budget. There is an ongoing risk assessment underway, and we will be better informed as to the extent of that trend when that is complete, and we will report to you those results in our next scheduled monthly cycle, which will be in June. So unless there are any questions on those two, I want to move on to 2nd Avenue Subway and East Side Access. Okay, we are measuring project performance on those two projects using the June 2009 rebaselining effort as a starting point. So when you hear of 6 and 7% completion, that is referencing that data date, if you will, as a starting point. You'll also hear us use the terms variances and trends, and just so we all understand the same nomenclature there, variances represent events that have occurred. Trends are events that are likely to occur. So variances are actual, trends are potential. With me today, Kent Haggis, who's our Senior Project Manager for the 2nd Avenue Subway project, and I'm going to turn it over to him to make the specific presentation on that project, and then we'll turn it over to Kurt Edgar, who will do the same on the East Side Access project. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to stand up. I've got a pointer here because I do want to go through our charts, and I need to refer to them. But basically, since the rebaselining last year, 2nd Avenue Subway's cost and schedule performance can be summarized as the costs have basically stayed in line with the progress of the project. There is one possible exception to that that's still in analysis, and that deals with the new estimate for the remaining work to be completed. However, the schedule is a different story. The schedule has endured some serious delays, and right now we're showing that the contingency that the project set up for scheduling has been almost 2/3 consumed by those delays. I have to, I can't do it like my Democratic club meeting. Okay, how's that? Good. So what the chart shows here, we've arrayed our data just to summarize. We have here the percent of contingency that's been consumed, and we show time. And the dashed line down the middle is our reference line. That shows under an ideal theoretical performance that we would use our contingency up evenly through the life of the project. 2nd Avenue has 7 months of contingency and about 7 years to go. So that line shows what would be a consumption of 1 month a year of its contingency, ending up at the end of the job with all the contingency used up. The actual data points here in the green are quite a bit higher than that, showing successively over the last few months an increase in contingency consumption or a reduction in the contingency remaining to the point where now we're showing 67% of those 7 months possibly tagged for delays that the project has incurred. For reference, down here, the little purple line, which goes to this axis over here, shows the progress of the job, the actual physical completion, and that you can see understandably is falling below the line because of the delays in the job are certainly impacting progress. The cost graph is a little bit more complicated, but it's the same idea. We show over here the percent of the cost contingency consumed. Now, for 2nd Avenue, that has two parts. It has an actual construction contingency and a design contract contingency, and it has a reserve, a special amount of money that's held in reserve for unforeseen events. Roughly, the contingency, the classic contingency, and the reserve are equal amounts. So we show here for our reference line, Mr. Chairman, the good plan, where we would end up at the job with only the contingency spent and none of the reserve touched. That's why there are two lines. If indeed the reserve is spent at the same rate as the contingency, so we end up the job with both pots of money expired, we'd be on this line here over time. That's why there are two lines. So what the numbers, and of course we're only in a few months here, but there's a very close cluster of job progress and costs about our ideal line. The only thing shown here in the jump is there's been a new estimate of the work remaining to be done. It's $35 million in increase of the previous estimate. If that number is applied, $35 million, to our contingency pot, this little blue line here would jump right up to here above both of our reference lines. But the project's in the middle of an analysis. They've actually completed most of it, showing that they intend to take this $35 million out of their design allowance for indeterminates instead of the contingency or instead of the reserve. So if that falls true, then our next report would show this dot and this arrow erased. So
What was the cost overrun against your budget that caused that cost?
there was a new estimate of the remaining work to be bid. The contracts are not yet out, and that estimate was $35 million over the previous baseline. I think the project has a better handle on what those numbers actually involve, but a lot of it dealt with the new entrance at 63rd Street, as well as the usual increases in steel and concrete and some other prices. So that's the $35 million there. The other information down here is the basic allowance for work orders that are being paid out to the three contracts underway now. So the bullets are, with about 6% of the job completed since last rebaselining, potentially 17% of the cost consumed, 67% of the schedule continually consumed. The reasons, there are four main I've highlighted: the new estimate that I just explained, the TBM tunneling contract, the main contract, is overrunning its budget and likely will continue to be delayed. The tunnel boring is going to start in May, some 5 or 6 months after the original plan. 86th Street excavation was delayed. There was significant issue with the DEP's approval for water main replacements. That issue took, on the whole, 5 months to bring to a resolution, and that certainly took that piece of work and made it critical to the project. So those are the three events that basically result in variances and actually changes to the cost and schedule plan. I put down the last one, building remediation. It's really a trend and not a variance yet, but the project's in the midst of an extensive survey of buildings in the impact zone around the rest of its construction to determine whether there needs to be some structural remediation of some of those buildings. While it does involve money, of course, we feel that's a major schedule issue at this time because such remediation requires a host of agreements between the owner and the agency, and those have been problematic in the past, indeed have contributed to the delays for TBM contract number 1.
Let me ask you a question.
Sir.
The costs that you're talking about for the repairs of the buildings, we just had this conversation with your group this morning, so I don't know. Why are you two guys not talking to each other? Because if it's going to cost, if you're saying it's costing millions of dollars, probably, and you're saying it's costing money, then something's wrong here. I'm confused. The conversation that we had this morning, you said that it is going to be your responsibility to tie up the buildings and make sure that it's not falling apart and straighten this out and straighten that out, those things. And it's going to cost money to do that. $6 to $8 million for a 4-block radius, 92nd to 96 or something like that.
Actually, it's 92nd to 99.
Right, for 4 blocks. So I said, as we go south, the price is going to go north. You said, probably so. Now you're saying that it's going to cost money also, that you're paying for this same thing that he's paying for?
No, just Same thing.
It's the same thing.
It is the same thing.
So what is your estimate number?
I don't have an estimate. I'm waiting to see the report that the agency's working on their study, and we'll look through that and verify their estimate. But I haven't done the work to do the estimate, but I'll certainly give a close review to the agency's process and their report and their estimate when it comes out. So I don't show that number on my graph yet because it's still, in my mind, up in the air.
Okay, so Mike, where do you get 6 to 8 million from?
Project staff has looked into it and estimated based on what we know today and what we need to do.
Mike?
I'm sorry. The project staff has looked at and estimated each and every one of the buildings that we need to do work in, including we worked with the real estate people regarding the relocation, the temporary relocation cost, and we have determined that $6 to $8 million is about the proper range.
But Mike, that was just for the first piece.
For
You
the,
also said
so the
we were-
stretch between 92nd to 99.
and the study to evaluate the cost of the other pieces is ongoing. We're waiting for that report.
That's
I'm assuming
correct.
that's the same report you're waiting for.
I've said that we are right now engaged in a evaluation of 80. We have 87 buildings that are in the impact area around 72nd Street. We have actually visited 70 of them. 13 exhibit issues that may or may not be problematic. We don't know at this point. And then we have another 87 such building at 86th Street, and if I'm correct, 24 buildings around 63rd Street. And these buildings are basically next to the points of excavation where we have ancillary buildings as well as the entry points to the stations. Because this, just remember that the tunnel here is a bored tunnel and the stations are bored stations. That means we do not open from the top down, similar to what happened around 92nd to 99th. So that's a really a big difference in the impact that the type of work may have on the surrounding buildings that are fragile.
Okay, well, when you get your estimates, can you pass them on so that, you know, we could see whether or not this is the same? That's part one. And the other part to that is I'd still like to see the landlords, if they had violations on their buildings, that we don't turn around and repair their properties at no cost to them so that we can recoup the monies that are being spent to shore up their properties where it should have been shored up from the beginning, just for point of record.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, brother.
I'll take it. Just again, to confirm process here, Michael has the responsibility of managing these projects with his team. The independent engineer is here to give us a judgment on the basis of information that they're reviewing from the project team. The fact that there's consistency between the two, albeit with some lag, in general is a good thing for us. But nevertheless, the fact is that there are real issues here, which I think is some of what may well have been discussed at the capital construction meeting earlier today, which you're referring to, Norman, as well as some of what the independent engineer is picking up. And I think it's important for us to take recognition of some of the emerging issues on these two complex projects. Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I recognize that this is early days, more or less, and so as one doesn't want to extrapolate good news ad infinitum, so we shouldn't extrapolate bad news. But these jump-ups really don't look insignificant. And I guess I'd like to hear from somebody over there whether we ought to be worried about this. It's not exactly I mean, it's our responsibility ultimately to get worried, but there's a lot of professional talent over there who should be able to level with us as to whether this is a really bad leading indicator, because I don't want to be sitting here in 4 years and have this project double or triple in size and have folks over there saying, well, we told you so, because this is when you're telling us right now.
I think it's Michael and Bill, probably appropriate for you to talk about your views of this. I think Jim's point is very important here. I mean, one of the things when we run our operational services, there's a near immediate feedback loop that comes for us. If we miss service, if we miss a rush hour, if things go wrong, we get the reaction pretty quickly, and we know we have that. The problem with capital projects, of course, is they don't have feedback loops, and the problem with that is that when you get in a hole, you tend to keep digging, literally and figuratively, and I think the whole point of this discussion is to ensure that we are taking appropriate cognizance of issues that may be arising on these projects as they are going forward. One, to be aware as a board of what's happening, and two, to be able to ensure, and this is the part that I think you should be watching for as Michael and Bill talk, that we're taking appropriate actions to try to mitigate the risks, which I think is really the challenge that's in front of us. Are we taking those actions? Are we recognizing it? Are we turning into something in which it's capital program management, or something in which we are simply the takers of the information that is going on? And I think, Michael, you should talk a little bit, I think, to your sense of how you're trying to deal with the types of issues that are becoming apparent here.
Okay, I'm going to just start, and then since Bill is the project executive, I'm going to let him complement what I'm about to say. I think that at this point regarding our use of contingency, one ought to remember that we do an analysis at various points in design, and then we estimate what the cost is going to be. And we have done an analysis in, I think it's last October, that showed actually the increase in construction costs. At that time, I think we were at about 60%, right? So that's about. And then we have redone these things right now in March, and actually we are trending the other way. So I'm going to let Bill address that specifically, and then we're going to discuss the schedule. Bill?
Could I ask a threshold question about contingencies before you start, Bill? With a project of this size, what, a $5 billion project roughly?
4.5.
Okay, $4.5 billion. First of all, in the world of construction, what is an appropriate amount of contingency, given the fact that you're dealing with a lot of unknown conditions under the street? What do you think is an appropriate level of contingencies that a project of this size and complexity should carry? Is it a 10% contingency? Is it a...
When you start from scratch?
Yeah, when you start from scratch, as we do.
Probably in the ideal world, you would like to have about 15%.
A 15%?
In an ideal world.
And what are we carrying in this unideal world that we live in?
Right now, we are actually, with the design almost done in a lot of the work. So that's where the contingency actually decreases, because we are much smarter. I would say that today we carry probably about 10% of the overall original tag. So that includes contingency and reserves together. So we believe that we are within a good range that will allow us to bring the project to completion within the budget that we have.
So we have a $450 million pot of money in contingencies. Is that what you're saying?
We started with about 500 and change, I think. We may have now, maybe you're correct, about that much.
And as relates to the reserve and the cost contingency, what types of items would hit the reserve contingency? For example, it's my understanding that we had to relocate a utility room for one of the high-rise buildings. Does that come out of the reserve? Does that come out of
we are actually designed around it to save money, so we're not doing that.
Okay.
But just so, the reserve is really a pot of money that is not only controlled by me, but by Jay. In effect, there is a double signature there.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make clear that I don't look at that even as money that is available. We are working, in effect, try to bring the project within the existing contingency. Clearly, in a situation like we have here, every day is a new day and is sometimes a new surprise. So that's why we have a reserve. And
to be clear, the reserve is an unusual element of our program. It's a reflection of the complexity of this project. When I came on board, I think it was absolutely appropriate that the reserve should be there. but I felt it should be in a situation which required my agreement to the use of the reserve when we were hitting those circumstances as well. Clearly, Michael and Bill and their team need a certain degree of flexibility to deal with the day-to-day things that happen on a project, and they are literally in the hundreds of things that are happening. But once we cross the line from our contingency resources to our reserve resources, that is a flag, and we should recognize that we've done that, and that's why I've instituted this in this way.
So that's great to hear and comforting to hear. Out of that $450 million pot of money, how much of it is this hopefully untouchable reserve? How much of it is cost? Can you break out the amounts of
We have about
contingencies?
100. I'm just going to take. I mean, it's approximate what I'm telling you. It's about $150 million in reserve, and about about 300 and change. I don't 310 or 320 in contingency available.
In what's being called, what is it, cost contingency? Is that
Contingency, yeah.
Okay, in contingency. Now, reading this as a non-engineer and putting it in plain speak, it seems to me that with 67% of the schedule contingency consumed, which is just a number of days, that's not a cost.
We did not yet speak about the schedule, so we will go to the next.
I'll hold my observation then.
Right.
But on the cost, we've consumed 17% of that, and we're only 6% of the way in, realizing that we don't have to build another launch box, right, because that was a front-end cost. So all we're really talking about is the cost of tunneling and building the stations. We've offlaid onto transit the cost of the equipment. So that $200 million came out, which was very nice. Not so nice for transit, but very nice for the project. And we've got basically the cost of tunneling and putting in the stations. And the falling buildings and the utility relocations and everything else.
You also have all of the systems.
All of the
Well, and of course
systems,
the
actually.
systems.
They track the signals, the power systems.
I'm talking about the heavy construction items.
But a lot of the money is being spent in the systems part. We have, due to the new fire protection code, we are having ancillary buildings all over the place. So we have extensive real estate acquisition that we had in place. So it is, the systems are going to be very complex and very complicated to achieve. So that's, by the way, the heavy construction, it's sometimes the easier part. As you know, if you look at your home, if you ever done any construction in your own, you'll find out that the roughing is very easy, but when it comes to the finishes, that's when you're going to have to be very careful, and the finishes here count a lot.
I understand that. I wouldn't say that it's been an easy construction job with slurry walls and seek piles.
No, it was not.
It has not been easy.
Yes, and and we still have to build a station. That means we're going to have more slurry walls north of 94th Street, 95th Street, going all to 99. So this is additional perils. But luckily in these areas we don't have fragile buildings.
I think at some point what I would like to see, because we get everything rolled up into a few big numbers that we have looked at the capital construction meetings. At some point, I would like to see a breakdown of how much of this is systems, how much of it is heavy construction for each one, so that we can all track and monitor our performance as we go along and how we're spending the money.
Not a problem.
Can I just ask you to hold for a second, Andrew? I think Bill's been trying to at least explain his view of the cost estimate. I think we might want to give him a chance to do that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To go back to the, I think was the original question, the October 2009, there was a new estimate done on our remaining contracts. To put that in perspective, we've awarded 3 contracts on the Second Avenue Subway program, which are our active contracts which are underway. We have 7 that are remaining that are in various stages of design. In October, we are at an earlier stage of design, as Michael referred to. Since then, we've advanced our design. So what that means generally as far as contingency, we had one major contract which is the 72nd Street Cavern contract, which completed design and went into procurement. It is out to bid at this time. Previously, in October, we were carrying a 10% contingency for design unknowns on that contract. We have reduced that to 3% once it's gone into procurement. So that 7% reduction on the same estimate we had in October '09 yields about $42 million in contingency, if you will, that the project is utilizing to absorb this $35 million increase. So as design estimates fluctuate and the design contingency fluctuates, we look at the total of those two. And if you compare the October to the present, that $35 million increase in October with a higher contingency in October was recalculated in March to and it shows that we can absorb that $35 million. So in terms of budget, as far as looking at long-range trends, I don't think we have a problem in terms of cost. And in a minute, we'll talk a little bit about schedule.
I think you may have left an impression that I think when we talked previously, you had said that you were not as concerned about the budget at this point. Is that accurate?
You're asking the independent engineer.
The independent engineer, is that accurate?
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
okay.
that's why we show the
Right.
dotted line to that
Okay.
high number there.
So I think we really should move on to the schedule issue, which is a more significant part of the two parts. But again,
Just one other quick question. Didn't we bid the 96th Street Cavern, Station Cavern?
Yes, we did.
And how did that come in relative to design?
That
and-
was long ago.
Yes, it was
Like,
long ago. I'm just
2-3 years ago, something like that.
It was the end of '08.
Yeah.
And
2 years
and
ago.
how did I'm just not remembering. I thought that came in over budget by $30 million.
I think that you recollect something else. There is the station, the Tally Cruise, that came in about $25-30 million above, and we remember that we had to go to the second bidder. Actually, because we went to the second bidder, we spent about $20 million more.
So sometimes it's good and sometimes the cost is a little more than we expect.
That's correct.
This is really from Mike Kalita. How much of a differential between cost and or schedule do you folks think is something that causes you to express concern to the chairman or to the agencies? How is it just a 1 month different or a few months trend unfavorable in either one of those areas that causes you to express concern?
A lot of that's going to depend on when the information comes to us. So, for example, in this particular case, it was quite obvious. 67% of the contingency expended, with so many more years to go. It's a no-brainer that is quite a concern. Typically, and we would.
Just ask
yes.
Mike. You got it at the 67% mark. It didn't come to you, say, at 40 or 30. You just bingo, all of a sudden it was 67?
There was an event that caused it to jump in a very short period of time, and that's what put it there. We are now looking at this analysis across the board at Capital Construction. So you'll see this on a regular basis. Every 3 months, you'll begin to see just this analysis.
because I think that's the one that actually, at least in my mind, has greater significance right now, and we should be speaking about it.
Okay. Yes, the schedule at this point, there are certain events that aid into our time contingency on the project, and the DEP is one of them, but that has been solved. And clearly, we are looking at some of the fragile buildings and some stuff that we do not know, but we are actually working ahead of schedule to try to identify. There are a number of initiatives right now that Bill will address in which we are looking at the work and we are trying to, in effect, rearrange the way the work is done so that we can make up schedule. And at the same time, we are very conscious of the fact that once you start having interface problems between the various contractors, one could open the door for problems that contractors will step in and then utilize and trying to get more money or not pay penalties for delays and so forth. So we are very careful as to how we look at it. We are trying to make sure that we are not removing the contractor's responsibility to carry out their projects. We are not yet done, so I cannot say exactly what and how much of the float we can recapture. We believe we can recapture a significant amount of time, but we need at this point to make sure that we do our homework properly, and we are not at a point that I can share with you how much time I can shave off and exactly how we're going to do it, and we are in the midst of doing it right now.
If I can, I'll elaborate a little bit. I share the same concern of the IEC on the schedule. I think we all are very much aware of how much delay we've incurred already with the TBM launch box with a variety of issues. It's taken much longer than we had anticipated. We had provided for some delay in the excavation of the launch box. I think the watershed event last year that really had the biggest impact on us was the evacuation of some buildings and DOB's limitation on us as far as blasting to remove the rock in the launch box. Our contractor was ready in the July-August timeframe to start blasting to remove rock. We were working with DOB and the owners of these buildings, and we were not able to actually start production blasting until mid-November. So that delay from August to November probably was the single biggest event that had an impact on our first contract, the TBM tunneling contract. The way we set up the schedule when we came to you before, and we revised our completion date and we provided for schedule contingency, it was based on a sequence of contracts and a sequence of handoffs from one contractor to the next. In other words, in terms of a schedule speak, you took the critical path of each contract, and as you completed the first contract, you then gave the follow-on contractor the access to that area. We did that in particular for the TBM mining and the cavern contracts, which are the overall critical path for our program. We set the logic up that way and applied our contingency to that. Because the TBM tunneling contract is as late as it is at this point, we are reassessing that, as Michael referred to. We are looking at new contract interfaces where we would overlap the cavern contracts with the TBM contract. So it's something we're looking at very carefully in order to be able to manage those interfaces and manage the risk that goes with that. But we believe that we can recover at least some of the time, and we're still trying to quantify how much that is, by overlapping those critical contracts.
I'm not intending to ring alarms where there are none called for. What I do think is important, though, is that if you see ways of mitigating, I mean, we're all realists on this side of the table, and it's just that kind of participation in the process that makes for a great deal more confidence. And if there's some bad news out here, that, we've got to be aware of that too. But also understanding that sometimes figures don't really tell the whole story. That there are things that human beings can do to mash this thing back into the shape you want it in. And it's that kind of involvement that, if without getting into the weeds, can make some of this stuff come alive.
Well, rest assured that we will keep you informed how we move forward, and we expect to do that on a continuous basis. And when we are a little smarter as to how we're going to reshuffle the deck here, we'll share it with you.
Other comments again?
Just a quick question, because I want to make sure I'm reading this graph properly. It stops at the 70% completion level in 2013, it looks like?
Yes.
Is there a straight line relationship? In other words, if you carried this line out further, it would suggest that you get to 100% by 2019. You're not suggesting that?
No, I think when I did the chart, it ends up at 2016.
2016, which
Yeah.
is when we theoretically are supposed to be
Yeah.
complete.
That's what the straight
100%.
line is intended to show.
Okay.
So I can show the rest of the graph, but for scale reasons, we didn't show the whole picture,
Okay.
ma'am. But we're showing that line would go out to 100% in December 16, as the project believes the completion date is.
And the percent of the project which is now complete is?
It's about 22% at this point.
Is complete.
Correct.
That's stage one.
Phase one.
Phase
correct.
one. Phase one. Right.
Correct.
22% of phase one is now complete.
Correct.
Thank you.
So just to give you my take of this, I think there is a real concern about the schedule. I think that Michael and his team are evaluating ways to be able to mitigate those impacts, and I think there's a business decision that may ultimately have to be taken, because some of the ways of mitigating the impacts introduce other risks into the project that have a way, in my experience, of materializing. So they should not be taken lightly or dismissed. I've had this conversation with Michael and his team. They are evaluating it that way, and we need to come back and take a decision. At this point, clearly, one of the things the committee should recognize is that this issue is clearly here. And recovering time once you've lost it is potentially a difficult thing to do. But we'll wait to hear what the project team wants to do. We'll come back, and if we need to have a discussion at this committee off cycle, we'll have a discussion at this committee off cycle. We're clearly not going to do something in which we say, well, the next time to come back is June if there's some reason why we need to have a discussion here. It will also be the case that going forward from April, the Transit Committee will be looking at this project. And again, I think that also, much like the same on East Side Access, further brings together the operations and construction aspect of this, which I think is going to be critical as well. Okay. East Side Access, gentlemen.
Okay. Good afternoon. East Side Access uses the same type of graphs that we just saw in 2nd Avenue. On the left-hand side is the cost graph. On the right-hand side, the schedule graph. East Side Access has only one line on the cost side, since East Side Access has no reserve, only contingency attached to individual contracts. The cost and schedule contingency consumption for East Side Access is ahead of schedule in more detail, with 7% of the construction completed since the rebaselining in 2009, which gave us the $7.328 billion budget, and the September 2016 revenue service date. We have expended 19% of our contingency, and 33 cost contingency, and 33% of our schedule contingency. As the graphs show, we have lost steadily ground over the last couple months on the cost side. On the schedule side, we have a sharp uptick at the beginning, and which then later leveled off. To go into the issues why we have these cost and schedule overruns, one major area is the Herald interlocking. Just to brief explanation, the Herald interlocking is the busiest interlocking in North America. It is owned by Amtrak, and it is unfortunately the area where Eastern Access builds a very complex contract, which is the Queensport tunnels, which come underneath the mainline tracks and then feed into these mainline tracks to connect to them. That's basically the area where the tunnels and the tracks coming from GCT connect to the existing Long Island Railroad tracks. The reason why I explained that to you is it's a very complex area, and this area is going to be constructed in 4 phases, which are these Herald structures contracts. These 4 phases consist each of a third-party contract, but also of force account contracts by Amtrak and Long Island Railroad to support those third-party contracts. What these contracts do altogether is they prepare the area so that these tunnels then can be, that these tunnels can feed into the existing interlocking. The reason for the cost overruns at Herald are mainly, which is approximately $27 million for the third-party contract in Phase 1. The reasons for that is there was a delayed access of about 6 months at the beginning of this contract. There were delays, and are still delays ongoing to delayed design work, which is running parallel with this contract. And also, the project was rebaselined in January of 2010, which basically reshuffled and rearranged the work in a way to not jeopardize the handover milestones with these Queensport tunnel contracts, which is a contract on a critical path. Also, it is a major contract and has to be completed on time, not to endanger the revenue service date of September 2016. The design, which attributes to a variance of approximately $5.5 million, also the extended design activities for Herald, but also additional design activities for the Manhattan contracts, which are not out yet, which go to the concourse work and the finish-out work in the caverns. And also of concern to us are the GCT caverns, where we have an unfavorable trend, meaning that the progress of construction expenditure, or the construction expenditure in percentage of about 22%, is opposed to a 57% contingency expenditure. In defense of the project, though, we have to say that at the GCT area, the project has aggressively moved to recover lost time, to make arrangements to reverse the trend, or at least stop the trend and keep it level by implementing a new approach to the excavation and to the removal of muck, which seemed to be the problem in the past. We will report in our next CPOC report about the successful or otherwise implementation of these measures. For the schedule, I would just like to say that the initial uptick actually was a loss of 2 months due to the late start of the Queensport tunnel contract, which caused the project to lose 2 out of their 6 months of schedule contingency on a critical path. But since then, this has leveled off. Not at least because the project has also aggressively moved to keep the handover milestones for CQ31, which is the Queensport Tunnel contract, intact, and rearrange the Herald Structures Part 1 contract. That concludes my presentation on cost and schedule for East Side Access, and if there are any questions, I will answer them.
Questions for the IEC or the project team?
What is the likelihood of that time? You said that the time has now leveled off since the initial uptick. What is the likelihood of any of that time being made up in that area?
I would like to. I think the project can answer this question better, but the only way that this particular time can be made up is through a completion of the Queensport Tunnel contract before time, due to a very successful boring of the soft ground tunnels in Queens.
That just as a comment, the soft ground tunneling is something that we have not done in New York, and it's a pretty risky stuff, but at this time we have a good contractor who's moving swiftly, and we hope that in this, I'm using a word that I normally don't use, hope. Right, because hope is not not something that we should have in construction, but we believe that it's a little milder than hope, that they will be able to deliver. But I will let Alan answer more precisely. Alan?
Yes, if I could. The East Side Access schedule has multiple paths. So Kurt is correct that the initial problem was a delay in the 31 award. When we got the contractor's schedule, we were able to rework certain things. So we've gotten the 31 piece of the schedule back. In order to get back the 6 months that we originally had afloat, what's critical right now is a particular design package that has nothing to do with the tunnels. It's a systems design package. We've passed the 30% mark in January. The 100% design is not due until September of 2011. We think that there's plenty of time between now and then to recover 2 or 3 months. We're working with our designer to develop a plan to do such. If we do that, then we'll build back our contingency to the 6 months. Something else will become critical, I'm sure, and we'll have to work aggressively at that. But as Kurt brought up, back to 31, we are sacrificing 53, and as the chairman said, with regards to 2nd Avenue, you always have to make decisions whether it's going to be cost or schedule. In this case, we're sacrificing the CHO 53 contract a little bit for both cost and schedule in order to make sure that we have the turnover points to the 31 contract, which is the initial part of our critical path.
And what portion of the former and current schedule is now dependent upon outside forces?
Yeah, I was going to say a lot. That's probably as good as hope or at the last CPOC meeting, this issue was brought up as well, and my comment at the time was that in hindsight, we should never have awarded the contract CHO 53 when we did. We did not have the design approvals in place. It was not the intention to do design parallel to construction. We will rest assured we will not be making the same mistake. We will not be awarding contracts when we don't have designs complete. So to the extent that outside force has impacted our schedule, I think that's behind us. But we do have certain other things, in particular, resources for both Amtrak and Long Island. In this busy interlocking, we need them both to do work for us as well as protect work that we're going to do. That's going to be something we're going to need to watch carefully as we go forward.
One would assume we would have more control. One would assume we would have more control over the ability to convince Long Island to do the work in a timely fashion than we might have with Amtrak. One would assume.
we have an excellent relationship with all railroads.
Is that a yes or a no?
That's a yes, and we look forward to
a productive
monthly
relationship with
correct.
everybody in the area.
That's correct.
We are actually paying for that productive relationship, so it should be there.
Okay.
Two questions. The soft soil conditions we're encountering in Queens are worse than what we encountered on the extension of the 7 line?
I'm sorry, one had nothing to do now. Under the 7 line, we're digging into rock.
I thought we encountered some soft soil there too that caused.
We had an area
Kurt's
that
shaking
we
his
froze.
head,
Yes,
so-
we had an area that we froze. It was a short stretch.
Okay.
The majority of our bore is in rock.
Okay.
Here, there is no rock.
Yeah, in our case, it's nothing that's unanticipated. It's designed for a soft ground below the water table, so it's specialized equipment. If you recall, we went through a elaborate RFP process to
Yes, I
make sure we
recall
got
that.
the best contractor. Right now, the contractor has not begun any tunneling, so it's too early to say how they'll do with that. But they are doing a good job, and we're ahead of all the planning and all the prerequisite activities.
So let's switch to cost for a second, because I'm assuming this is a $7.5 billion project, roughly. So what's the amount of contingency? We're carrying 15, 10. What's the amount there?
Actually, much lower than we would like to. I think it's in the vicinity of 5%.
5%. And how much of that is reserve, and how much of it is?
Everything is contingent, no reserve.
How come?
It was not set up like that to start with.
And the reason for that was?
I have no clue. I wasn't here to look at it or know.
That's kind of scary.
Well, we are managing, and I'm looking forward to the medal that Jay said is going to pin on me if I'm able to get the job done that way.
I think he's
That is going to be shown on my tush, probably.
I was just going to ask him. I thought I was getting the medal, but if that's the case, he can get both of them.
I mean, I just don't want us to feel like the Mass Turnpike Board did when the big dig came in at the level that it did, and they carried kind of light contingencies, so this is pretty scary.
We have light contingency. There's nothing that's going to change that. The chairman reminded us that there's no additional money coming our way, so we have to create our own. We're working aggressively in a variety of areas to do that. We're re-looking at a couple of our designs to see if we can re-engineer them to have some significant savings. We went out early to take advantage of the low prices for some commodities, and we're ordered this winter as part of the stimulus package that Eastside Access received. And the early indications is we're receiving low bids, below budget for that. We're also working with our contractors to see if there's some value engineering, and I'll actually touch on that because one of where we have the most success there is with the cavern contract that Kurt reported is trending as a cost increase, but one of the things that is not taken into consideration is some value engineering that should replenish some of that contingency. We're also working very cooperatively with the railroad, and we have certain design changes or value engineering that we've jointly approved. It's too early to say that we're going to realize all of the savings until the designs are complete. So we've agreed that we will develop a list of all these opportunities, the dollar value, and the approximate schedule point in time when we'll either know if we've seen them or not. We'll provide those to the independent engineer so we can monitor that on a regular basis.
And the independent engineer's view on the schedule, on the achievability of the schedule?
The schedule for the remaining contracts, the float that we have, the 4 months is attached to actually 3 contracts, which is the current Queens Tunnel, Board Tunnels contract, the subsequent design, the subsequent signal for the new tunnels from GCT to Herald, and then to testing and commissioning. Alan just said that they again took measures to upgrade this signals design contract to basically make sure that this will get procured on time, awarded on time, and hopefully executed on time. For the testing and commissioning, we are all waiting for a more detailed schedule for this activity that we can then cut into the overall integrated project schedule. That will also tell us more, because it's going to eliminate the doubts by stakeholders like Long Island Railroad, which are going to have to provide the resources to do some of that work. And these activities, if executed properly, I think the revenue service date of September 2016 is still valid. However, the pressure points on this sequence of contracts is also clear. It comes from the Herald structures contract, like CHO 53. It comes then also from the design, which I also stated has problems in Herald and in Manhattan. And, you know, it is going to be, how are they going to be able to put the resources together to make sure that the signals design is going to be delivered on time and these others are under pressure. And quite frankly, testing and commissioning is generally a stepchild of such projects. And I mean, if somebody needs time, it gets cut off there and added to the contracts, which are have more exposure. So my short answer is I hope that in the next one or two meetings we will be able to tell you more.
Thanks for your candor.
If I could just comment on the testing and commission point, we certainly are not treating it as a stepchild. We've worked aggressively and in cooperation with the railroad to develop the testing and commissioning portion. And to be fair to the independent engineer, they have not seen that yet. It's being cut in this month, and when we make our submission to them at the end of the month, they'll see that. And we'll certainly be looking for their input to see if there's any questions or doubts. That still leaves a year at the very end for the railroad to do their pre-revenue testing. There's no other activities going on at the same time. That will be something else. That will be the last piece of the schedule that has not been developed in detail, and we'll move to that next to see, make sure that the railroad is comfortable with that duration, or see if there's some opportunities for some savings there.
Okay. Has anybody looked into a possibility of savings for materials that are prepaid for or paid for when they're stored on site, or prompt payment for a discount?
As far as the materials, yes, that's why I was saying we've ordered, we're in the process of ordering about $50 to $75 million worth of materials that we'll store in a warehouse for future use by both the railroads and the third-party contracts. We're also looking to see if there's more opportunities to do that. As far as the
and we'll get a savings from that.
Well, right now where we're seeing is because of the low prices for some commodities, we are seeing savings.
Okay. But as far as pre-ordering the material and getting it stored on site, a lot of times when we buy material, they quote us a price, and then we'll obviously pay them. But will you pay them as soon as it's on site, or will you prepay part of it? Will you give them some money up front? Because a lot of companies are giving discounts for people who purchase products that way.
We certainly have not done that, but I think for both projects we'll take that back and talk with procurement to see if there's opportunities to do that.
Okay.
One of the things to remember regarding schedule is that actually actual construction is going to end up in the mid of 2015, and the last year is, going to be commissioning.
Kurt said two things that piqued my curiosity. The first, and so I'm actually directing these to you, Mike. The GCT muck, you know.
Yes.
I'm surprised by that. Maybe I was asleep through something, but although it's definitely wet and full of water down there, I didn't expect you'd run into muck. Was that something you had planned for?
No, we refer to the material that we take out as muck.
Okay.
Okay, it's
Yeah.
crushed stone and
junk.
whatever that is.
Right.
The problem that we had was that we had to install a crusher and then a conveyor belt to take this material from Manhattan into Queens.
Right.
And the way we have moved around the various tunnel boring machines, we needed to actually install a new conveyor belt that is in place now, and I'm hoping that this week is already we're moving muck or crushed rock out of there.
Well, Kurt kind of indicated that you might be able in the next report to tell us whether or not this plan is functional and whether it'll get us back on schedule, and hopefully, since we've spent
I think
57% of
yeah.
the reserves, maybe.
I think it is functional at this point from what I understood, and we are already moving stuff out.
Okay, that's good. The second thing that piqued my curiosity is, the issue of signals can never be overemphasized because getting the signals to work together is always a big issue. So I had assumed that since the signaling system was done 2 years before the end, we'd have a little bit more lead time. But I think Kurt said that the railroads have not yet defined their final testing and revenue service procedures for that last year. Is that right? So we still have that to...
I think that was actually, I said that. The way we've set up our schedule is construction finishes actually in 2014, and we under the construction contracts, there's integrated testing and commissioning that takes place there.
Okay.
At the end of 2000 or the middle of 2015, we are basically in essence done. We'll turn over the entire system to the Long Island Railroad for approximately a year, where they can do what we're calling pre-revenue testing. This is a brand new system, so it needs FRA testing, it needs fire department commissioning. There's a whole slew of activities.
A lot of stuff to do in
correct.
1 year.
And that's what we've been working with the railroad. We've been looking at other systems that have commissioned new projects. So we're comfortable jointly with the railroad in the testing commissioning part, and now we'll work on the last year for the pre-revenue testing.
Okay.
One component that should be make sure that we add is training, and it's there. All of the people running the trains will need to be trained and certified. They will go through the process, and at the end of it, they will be certified that they can operate these trains. That takes a long time.
I'd like to say that beginning next month, the joint committees of Metro North and the Long Island Railroad will take on the responsibility of the oversight of East Side Access. And I'm glad, looking down the line here, I'm glad to see that 4 of the members of the Metro North Committee are here, because this is a great wake-up call. Because I know that we had some preliminary meetings and the question came up, well, what about this East Side Access? We don't know all we should know about it. So I think this was a good wake-up call, and we may call upon you to brief us a little further so that we understand it fully when we start to look at this oversight. And I'm sure that Mitch's people may have the same feeling, because I think we've done it from the outside, and now we're going to be doing it with the 2 railroads that are going to be affected by it.
Okay. Are there any other questions at this time? Okay. Thank you. I do think, echoing something Doreen said, that clearly we do have to watch very carefully to make sure nothing's getting away from us here. If it is something in which we need to come back to this committee sooner, we should not hesitate to do that. And otherwise, it may be that we should communicate to the committee, even with a memo, just to update people on the discussion that we had here once you have the results of some of the things that you're looking at. Okay? Thank you.